I know that some in our audience know the finer points of hockey.
The Chris Johnston Show.
We are your friends.
The biggest stories, bringing you inside the game.
What did you hear?
The Chris Johnston Show. Powered by Sports Interaction, Canada's sportsbook.
What is going on?
Here's Chris with your host, Julian McKenzie.
Part of the game.
Florida man CJ is here. You could tell by the sunglasses, the golf polo. I feel like are you getting some golf in before you leave Florida, or?
Man, you got a twisted view of what covering the Stanley Cup Playoffs is. If you think anyone is trying to take that. It is all day, every day, in the best way possible. I love it. Certainly no complaint, but I've been burning it at both ends. So needed the sunglasses today. It was a short night of sleep.
How many hours of sleep did you get?
About 4.5, 5. By the time I filed last night and after Game 4 here in Tampa, up early doing the pod with you guys, and then flying back to Toronto today for Game 5 tomorrow, and then I'll be back in Tampa in 2 days' time. It's the best time of year. As I say, it's certainly not a complaint, but it's a challenge on the body at times.
Jeez, and how do you offset that? Because I imagine if you're doing all of these different trips back and forth or just covering games, that is an easy way for you to just eat like crap, like ordering in food, pizza, like whatever. Like, how do you stay disciplined with like what you're eating and drinking over when you're covering a postseason series?
I don't know if I have stayed too disciplined, so I'm not sure I can trumpet anything, but I've kept getting my runs in. I went this morning at 7, so that helped. Drink lots of water, and then just try not to eat too much food. But honestly, being in the rink, like Tampa has a great pregame bill, $8 US, untouched by inflation. One of the only things in our society, and the food's good, and they got an ice cream bar. And Florida CJ just can't say no to that ice cream bar. And then second intermission, when I really don't need to be eating anymore, they bring up like these chicken fingers, and so I've fallen off the wagon slightly in terms of keeping the health locked down. But it's a short time of year. Mix in a salad today and get right back on the horse.
It seems like Amalie Arena seems like a pretty good spot to be. I mean, you've talked about how there's like a cool bar, like cool spots to eat and bars around the arena. It seems like it's pretty helpful too. There's like a guy who works in the press box named Alex who seems to be pretty helpful. You were talking about that in the group chat the other day.
Yeah, I walk into the arena for Game 1 and he was working at the credential table and he's like, "Love the show." And it's funny. I was out at Leafs practice on the off day between Games 3 and 4, and the suburban rink in Brandon, Florida. And the first thing I walk in that rink, and someone came ripping over and listens to the show. So it's cool. We got people listening everywhere, Julian. We appreciate everyone who takes the time, and it's actually cool to come down here and meet a few people that are listening to us that are working around the Lightning or fans, hanging out at the rink. So. Yeah, I love it here. Honestly, I think it's got to be one of the top places to go watch your favorite team play. Just because, look, the weather's almost always great, very relaxed atmosphere, fun building. The Lightning are a great team. Lots of great players to watch when you're at one of their games. I just think it's a pretty cool setup if you're looking to spend a couple days. And quite honestly, it seemed like a number of Toronto people did that. I had a couple people on the flight saying that they found it as cheap basically to fly down here and eat the associated costs to go to a game than getting tickets at Scotiabank Arena. So it's not something even in the playoffs. It's a pretty good place to spend a road trip.
So could you imagine if the Leafs win Game 5 of that series and they have a chance to clinch a first round series victory for the first time since 2004 in Tampa Bay? I'm getting the vibe that like it's cheaper to fly down to Florida and watch them clinch history, as opposed to maybe if it goes 7, you're trying to get into the Toronto building. How wild is that?
I don't know if it's actually cheaper, but it's the fact that I guess it's a conversation tells the whole story. But look, I'm sure we'll get into the series a little bit until this Leafs team wins a fourth game in a series. They haven't done it, and not to be too hard on them. Obviously, Game 4 was pretty disastrous in terms of, just how little pushback they had in the game, how easily Tampa took control and comfortably they evened things up. Even if the Leafs are to win Game 5, until you see them do it, it's going to be in everyone's mind. They were up on Boston, one of those years, 3-2, and lost the series going home for Game 6. They obviously were up 3-1 on Montreal with home ice advantage and lost 2 games at Scotiabank Arena and one other at the Bell Center. And so till you see them do it, they haven't done it. And in the meantime, Steve Dangle's heart rate just surges through the roof.
Oh, my God. I wonder if there's any prop bets on that. I'm going to ask David Bastel when we talk to him a little bit later. There is something that I've noticed from that Toronto-Tampa series. And yes, we're going to get into that and some other headlines from some of the other playoff series that have been going on to this point. And of course, because it's Monday, we'll get to ask CJ. But the blowouts, like Toronto and Tampa, in each of these games, we haven't seen too many close, tight games. And it's not just something that is affecting that series. A lot of different series have been seeing a lot of these blown out games. There's been like very few 1-score games. I know we've had a few overtime periods, but that's a trend I've noticed. Like I think 2 days ago, Arpin Basu, our good friend Arpin, was tweeting how he counted, I think, 4 games that ended with 1-goal margins. And I think he may or may not have been counting games that were pretty close and then just extended by an empty net goal near the end. But there have been quite a few games where the goal margins have been more than 2 or 3,
Well, this is a potential downside, I suppose, if you want to say it, of having so much scoring. I mean, we're seeing scoring up across the league still in the playoff games. I mean, the trend that we identified and discussed in the regular season hasn't gone anywhere. And, I have to think that the number of penalties being called is a factor here. We're just seeing way more power plays than we're used to in the playoffs. It's clear the referees have stuck to a standard. I personally don't have a huge issue with that as long as it sort of maintains some level of consistency, because I think there's a chance then for the teams and the players to adjust to it. But I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, but it's definitely a factor. Just being around this Leafs Lightning series, there's a lot of discussion about just a surprise, like an open surprise from the coaches and players about how much is being called. The Leafs, as we're recording this, actually lead the playoffs in penalties taken, which, if you watch so much during the regular season, it's not really part of their DNA, was not an issue they really ever had to deal with, frankly. They just weren't that heavily penalized of a team. And so, I think that's having some factor here. This series has been weird. One team is led by 3 goals in each of the 4 games at a certain point. I mean, 3 of the 4 games have been 3-0 for one team over the other. The other started 2-0 for the Leafs, game 2 or game 3 rather. Just a strange series. Like it almost makes it harder to feel like you can predict anything, or like I don't know what's going to happen. My buddy was texting me this morning, like, I think the Leafs can come back. I was like, well, of course they can come back. It's 2-2. They got home ice. I mean, if you erase the way what you just saw Sunday night and just look at the objective facts of the series, they're right there in it with a great chance to beat the 2-time defending champs. But it feels strange when you see one team or the other just get, beaten so in such a one-sided manner. So, bit of a strange first week of the playoffs. I don't know if it's going to continue, but I can't imagine we're going to see 6-0, 8-2 games the whole way through the playoffs. But who knows, man? It's we live in strange times.
Well, at least in the Toronto-Tampa series, we've seen 3 goalies, because Eric Shalgren got to play a little bit in game 4. Well, then again, there are a few other series where we've seen 3 goalies as well. I mean, I'm thinking normally like 16 teams start off in the Stanley Cup playoffs, so you're guaranteed to see at least 16. But Pyotr Kochetkov, Louis Domingue, I'm trying to think of some of the other ones who have appeared in the Stanley Cup playoffs for different reasons. Casey DeSmith, who was filling in for Tristan Jarrett, who was skating the other day, but who knows when he's ready to play. We've seen so many goalies get into this Stanley Cup playoff so far. That has also been a very striking trend.
It is, and that one to me feels more random. Like, why does a player get injured? It's obviously injuries are part of this sport and pretty much every sport, but there's been a lot at that one position. We haven't seen a couple goalies too. We haven't seen Frederik Andersen for Carolina yet. We haven't seen Tristan Jarry. Obviously those guys want to get back. We haven't seen UC Saros. I think unfortunately he's not going to be able to play for the Predators. They're in real tough against Colorado, but that's opened the door for the number 2 and number 3 in the Predators organization to to be playing these games. It's a hard one to figure. You saw Darcy Kemper unfortunately take that stick through his mask, and he's out of the game. I mean, it just feels like there's a lot of random shit going on.
Yes.
No better way for me to analyze it than that. And so we've seen all these goalies, and some of them have been great stories. I know we talked about Ingram, having 50 saves in a game, but it's got to spike the heart rate of coaches and the organizations, because it's hard to win a Stanley Cup with your third goaltender. It's not impossible. We've seen miracle runs in the past. There was a point where Ken Dryden was relatively unproven. He takes the Montreal Canadiens all the way to the Stanley Cup. So there's history there. Cam Ward in Carolina in 2006 was relatively unproven. I mean, it can happen, but depth right now is a benefit, because unfortunately no goalie seems too safe for too long.
By the way, we shouldn't also forget Jordan Binnington getting back into the goalie net. I mean, that's purely off a performance issue, filling in for Ville Husso. Jeremy Swayman in the last two games has helped Boston get back into their series against Carolina in relief of Linus Ullmark.
Jonathan Quick, Kyle Peterson. I mean,
yes,
you're almost a weird team if you're a week into the playoffs and you haven't used two goalies. Like more teams have used two goaltenders than have used one at this point. That's strange. But look, that's a reflection of the blowouts too. In some cases, that's performance related. It's not all been injuries. But this is a star-crossed year. It makes me think something weird is going to happen in the playoffs in general. Just all these sort of trends or things that we're not used to seeing keep happening, and maybe that means we're in for a different kind of champion or a different kind of playoffs in general. I'm
trying to remember which group chat I put this in, but I put in as a bold prediction we would see an Ebug during the playoffs, and I was kind of did it as like a joke. But at this rate, I almost feel like we might see it. There's a chance.
I got to say, I've liked those Ebug stories. I was in Toronto, and there's been a couple. The Leafs had a guy on the bench this year, Alex Bishop, university goaltender as a backup. Obviously David Ayer's game. Like, I think they can be kind of neat stories and allows everyone to dream. Like, imagine getting into an NHL game, you're basically a beer leaguer. But we don't need to see that in the playoffs. I mean, that would be unfortunate. And so I hope that you haven't put that energy in the universe, Julian, because I think there's a fine line between a good story and then something that's kind of an embarrassment to the league, or something that doesn't reflect very kindly on what's the most important time of year for the NHL.
Okay, hold on a second. Let me hold off on that. So let's not hold off, but let me go in on that a little bit more. Why would that be an embarrassment for that to happen in the playoffs, even if there is the potential of a very good story?
Because game 48 of 82 really doesn't matter. I mean, look, we like the games. The playoff races can be tight. Every game does quote unquote matter. But I think when you have a goaltender go in and it's an Ebug situation, okay, we can turn a blind eye to the competitive imbalance part of it. I just think every playoff game matters so much. I mean, it's why we care. You can't say that anything that happens in any of these games isn't important to the series. And so, if an Ebug's going in, his team really has no realistic chance of winning. I realized the David Ayers thing. I remember the history. Scott Foster came in for a couple minutes in Chicago a few years ago, and they managed to hold on to a win. But I just think in general, you're seeing an Ebug come in and that team's toast. And I just with how much is riding on the line, I don't think that's the right look. And Gary Bettman was actually in Tampa this week and was asked about Ebugs and basically said, in his view, it's not yet an issue because on a sort of, if you look at the whole history, this hasn't happened too much. And he said, but if something changes our mind, we'll look at changing the rule. And so I feel like an Ebug coming in a playoff situation and going horribly, that could be enough to change a rule where maybe teams can carry a third goaltender like we saw during the COVID season or what have you. So, yeah, I love the stories. I'm not picking on any of the Ebugs that get thrown into those games. I even know of a couple guys that are Ebugs in various arenas around the league. And I know that they're just helping out and whatever. But I think it'd be a bad look in a 2-2 playoff game 5 of a pivotal series that's tied, and you got to put in a guy from the nosebleeds to play in net. I don't think that would be good for anyone.
That's a fair point, especially if that game could. I mean, every game, every moment matters in the Stanley Cup playoffs. It could essentially influence a series. That's a fair point.
Yeah, and it's a season, right? Like it's a series is a culmination of 8 months of work and effort. And I mean, I just think that competitively that it would be a bit of a joke. And look, I don't think we've been that close yet, actually, in the playoffs. I mean, obviously a couple situations where a guy leaves injured, like Ranta left injured in the game, Kemper, as I mentioned earlier. I suppose then you're only one more injury away from getting to Ebug territory, but let's keep the fingers crossed here.
Yeah, and by the way, I'm when I said the Ebug thing, it's not me wishing injury on anybody, because look, wishing injury on anybody is not even a good thing to do anyway. It's just me trying to prognosticate, which doesn't always go that well anyway. And now it's time to talk to David Bastel from Sports Interaction. By the way, Sports Interaction available for people 19 plus in terms of age, and of course, please, if you're going to play responsibly. I always like to start off with a nice little icebreaker to get us going. I understand that last year you guys may or may not have had a prop bet about whether or not Steve Dangle on his watch-alongs is wearing pants or not. I'm wondering if this year you guys could put together a prop bet about how high his heart rate can go, because they're tracking his heart rate during these watch-along streams.
Okay, well, let me ask you guys this then. And the three of us have all been watching it from time to time, off and on, right?
Yes.
Where would we set that over under number at? Because I've seen it in the hundreds, low hundreds, we should say.
Yeah. We don't want hypertension being built up with Steve.
Exactly. We are no harm whatsoever, but I don't know. I'm almost thinking it's around a 102, 103. If it's you know what? If they keep on playing first periods like they did in game number 4, they could be hitting some overs in a hurry, guys.
Yeah, I think you almost have to adjust it up because we're getting to the crucial part of the series too, right? So there's no way his heart rate won't be elevated for games 5, 6, and maybe a 7 versus what we've seen.
This is crunch time. You're absolutely right. Yep.
Absolutely. Speaking of over-unders for games, I've noticing a lot that there are a lot of blowouts and not too many close games. I wonder how that's been affecting people betting on that for Stanley Cup playoff games this postseason.
It's a really good question. I had some discussions yesterday with our lines management group, and what they were saying to me is we should not be surprised if we see 7s on the board which is unheard of. Like during the regular season, we saw 7s a handful of times when you look at teams like Florida, Toronto, Colorado, especially when they go head to head, you're going to flirt with 7s, but in the playoffs, guys, I mean, it's funny. I've never seen so many, like tonight, 6.5s across the board, basically outside of that Boston Carolina game, which is a 6. Traditionally, 3 out of the 4 games on a 4-game night would be 5.5s. And now we're seeing 6.5 totals. But that being said, there's only one series that is a perfect 3-0 to the over. Can you guess that series?
Is it Florida, Washington?
Nope.
3-0. Is it mini? Is it the mini series?
See, I thought it was Minnesota too.
Is it Boston, Carolina?
No, it's not Boston, Carolina either. That one's pretty good though. 3-1 to the over. It is the Rangers and Penguins are a perfect 3-0 to the over. But that being said, tidbit there, a couple of those games have been 6s. So they haven't had the 6, you know what I mean? So, but that being said, we have 3 series on 3 series, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 6 series that are to the over right now. The Kings and Oilers, surprisingly, because we've seen some high scores there, are only 2-2 right now because we saw the 4-0, which and we saw earlier in the week 6-0 was actually an under because it was a 6.5. So
okay. A lot of numbers being thrown there, but obviously making sense. That's fine. That's fine. One last one before we let you go here. On that subject, as we go one step further, with some of these series and the high scoring, it's not necessarily just the favorites just getting some of those high numbers. We're seeing a lot of potential upsets coming up over these next few games. Potential.
You know what?
Who knows?
I think last week I was telling you two gentlemen that Carolina has won this series. Right. And right now there is some significant Boston money coming in. And I know they split the homes in either buildings, and that's cool and everything. But same can be said about the Wild and Blues. Now that the Blues are back in it, that series is kind of split down the middle. And surprisingly, I'll leave you with this. Surprisingly, Toronto still favorite in the series against Tampa Bay, now having home ice advantage, heading back to Toronto for game number 5. That's a little bit of a surprise to me. And the other one too, Calgary, despite being down, and Florida, despite being down, both favorites to win their first round series.
Interesting that some of those haven't been adjusted yet, considering how some of these other teams have been playing over these last few games. Very good as always, David. We appreciate you. Looking forward to the next time we chat. David Bastel from Sports Interaction. Thanks so much for hanging out with us.
Thanks so much. Looking good, CJ. Looking good.
Thanks, brother.
Oh, man. Big Money Siege, Florida Man Siege. Let's get through some of these big headlines from these playoff games. Let's talk a little bit more about that Tampa-Toronto series. The fact that you can't tell who's the more dominant team after 4 games, that is really interesting to me. Like, Toronto looks really good in one game, and then Tampa just kind of corrects everything in game 2. Then Toronto looks good again, and then within a few moments in game 4, it's pretty much done and dusted. How do you see this best of 3, which is what Toronto and Tampa are pretty much left with, playing out?
Well, I think that, basically it's the kind of series that makes you look bad. You know what I mean? Like if you had any prediction, if you say this has to happen for this team to win, like, that hasn't been the case. I mean, Andrei Vasilevsky's probably the goaltender you'd pick right now. We saw NHL players in the NHLPA pool. If you one guy to win you a game or whatever, you'd want Vasilevsky, and he's been relatively human. He's allowed 14 goals in 4 games. Which is more than you would expect. And yet the series is still tied. And, we've seen Jack Campbell pulled, but also have a shutout in the series. Matthews and Marner have produced offense, and still the Leafs fans, I think, have a sense of like, oh no, we're back to where we were before. I mean, it's just a tough one to call. And it's really hard to make sense of it because we've seen so many penalties. Again, I don't mean to harp on this, but to see this many power plays in games, like getting 7 power plays in a playoff game, multiple playoff games, it's if that continues to happen with 2 teams that have these power plays, who am I going to say is going to win? Is it going to be the night when Kucherov throws daggers through your heart? Or is it going to be the night when, Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner connect on a couple power play goals, which, we saw one in the series anyway. So it's to me, it's a bit of it's the chaos series we thought it was going to be. We just didn't know it was going to be chaotic in this way. And, I thought maybe some close games. I thought maybe we'd see a high-scoring game, like a 6-5 type of game, but it's usually been one team runs away from the other. So, we saw Tampa get to 7 in game 4. Otherwise, it's taken 5 goals to win each of the first 3 games. Man, it's just been strange. And the Leafs do feel like this is the moment they've wanted, I would say. They didn't want to get here this way, of course. You'd rather win. You'd rather play a great game 4 and get up 3-1 again. And everyone say, well, this time, could you close it out at 3-1? But, they've said all year that they're a different team, that they're not the same group of guys that lost meekly to Montreal in game 7 and game 5 against Columbus in the play-in and the bubble, and a couple game 7s in Boston where they really didn't bring their best. And now they get a chance to prove it. And if they don't, and if they go down quietly, I don't even know. Like, obviously it's about winning the series, wins are what matter, but I do think there's an element of how they play that matters these big games. Because if you see another sort of freebie handover victory to the Lightning, like they gave in game 4, I mean, I don't know how long you can keep coming back with the same thing. And it's not I think sometimes people have got ahead of themselves on that, but at a certain point, I just think the management's going to get to a breaking point. And so, if you want to think positively, if you want to put some good energy in the air for our man Steve Dangle and a lot of other people that care about this team, this will be the moment that they push through the doubt and whatever has held them back in the past, and they play their best games and find a way to move on. And if it goes the way it's gone before, if this is the same old movie again, my goodness, it's going to be a difficult locker cleanout day, a difficult week or 2 or 3 after the season to chart a way ahead, because I don't think you can just assume it'll be different next time. I mean, they objectively had a better year in every way you would measure that, whether it's things like specialty teams rankings or some of the individual performances or points or wins, regulation wins, like literally any way you would cut this, the Leafs had a better season than they had in the previous years. And if it ends up in the same result, I mean, let's be watching on Tuesday night, my friend, because it's as the Leafs turns takes its next episode in Game 5.
Oh, I can't wait for that episode. As someone who is just in it to see people just go crazy, win or lose for Toronto, but also seeing how Tampa Bay, if they are able to somehow mount an effort to not only win this series, but win a three-peat, I am all the way intrigued for how this series goes down. I just think with the Leafs, I think you're right. Like, they've had all these improvements from year after year after year. They just can't get rid of those demons, and we don't need to rehash demons all over again. Like, the one thing I just keep thinking about with this team, though, throughout the year, you've mentioned with management, they kind of don't see like this as like a all in, like win now year. Maybe next year has to be it. But I have to imagine, and I think you're alluding to it a bit too, like the expectations have to change a little bit with how they view the roster, depending on how this series could go, if it doesn't go the way that it wants to. We're not trying to say it's over or anything like that. It's just
2-2.
It's a crucial time. It's 2-2. Like they need to win Game 5 and 6, as far as I'm concerned.
Right. They've got such a great opportunity in front of them. Like they're playing an awesome team, the Lightning, and it's 2-2 with 2 home games, potentially. You got to win one of the next 2. But, yeah, I mean, there's so much they can erase, I guess, a lot of this conversation or push it to the background. I mean, look, Tampa faced these very questions, right? Tampa was a team for a lot of years that couldn't kind of get over the hump. I mean, they certainly went on longer playoff runs than we've seen Toronto do so far. But they were a really good team for a long time before they won those 2 cups. And, Washington is another team that were, winning President's trophies and losing in round 1 or round 2, for a long time until they did. And so I think that's where the Leafs management has been, is that they just look at these kind of examples, and there are many others across sports, not just in hockey, where you got to remain patient even as everyone loses their heads. But if they just go down meekly, I think that's kind of where I'm at. I don't know how you don't at least look at a change or 2 of some significance. Now, it's not to say they're going to do that. But it would be very difficult to roll back the same thing. I think if they lose another couple games in a 7-3 kind of manner, like, they were down, they were out of that game after 8 minutes in Game 4. Like, they were toast, and they just can't lose that way. I mean, they can. If they do, though, it'll be chaos. But the other side of this coin is there's 2 teams in a series that want to win, and I'm so impressed by the Lightning. I'll give you an example, Julian. Like, I've been around playoffs a long time. So Game 4 yesterday, Sunday, John Cooper didn't even make his players come to the rink before the game. Like, he gave them a total, like, just you can just stay at home and show up for the game. And I don't think really most coaches wouldn't do that, partly just because it's the way it's always done, that you kind of have a morning skate or at least a morning meeting. It's about, staying focused and having a ritual, a routine, making sure everyone's mind's in the right place, showing them a little bit of video, maybe reinforcing them with a certain message. And the Lightning are just like, you know what? It's Mother's Day. Just stay home if you want, or come to the rink if you want. I mean, what trust he has in his players, right? That they will do whatever they need to do on their own time. It's sort of like not babysitting, right? And they come out and deliver a first 10 or 15 minutes the way they did. And really wasn't any let up in the game. I know the Leafs scored 3 goals in the third period, but there was no doubt about who was winning that game from 8 minutes on in. And so that's a team that's figured out how to do it, and they had to figure it out. So now, if you want to cast that on Toronto, they have to figure out how to play with that same level of urgency and execution. I think that is the key. If you see them play awesome and lose, I think, again, fans will be disappointed, but I think you can get, okay, they're starting to get there. But they have to show it, because that Game 4 looked a little too familiar for anyone who's watched this core play some big games. And have a prosperous opportunity and fumble it away. And my goodness, they fumbled another one in that game.
Yeah. And one other thing too, for how the remainder of the series could go, Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner, they also need to be on. They haven't been off in the games where they've looked good. They've been able to produce, but if they end up being neutralized for the rest of this series, I think a lot more criticism is going to come the way of the Leafs. That can't happen. Not for them.
You wouldn't think. Ross Colton scoring big goals though for the Lightning. And
Ross the boss.
David Kamp's got a few goals for the Leafs. Like I think those players just have to play well. Honestly, it's so easy, and I'm sure people are writing this story today in Toronto. Like, John Tavares has to score 3 goals for the Leafs to win the series. It's like, okay, if John Tavares does score those 3 goals, their chances of winning the series are better. But I actually think it's a bit of a misnomer. I think the truth is they just have to find a way to keep the puck out of their own net. I mean, a team like the Leafs is going to score goals. I mean, they still scored 3 goals in Game 4 in garbage time, essentially. Like there's no doubt they can score. And as I said, they've made Vasilevsky look human, but they have to be committed. When the Lightning get the forecheck going like they did in Game 4, like Toronto didn't know how to get out of its own end. They were swimming without a paddle, man. And so, I think that they have to deliver a level of urgency and have good shift after good shift after good shift. And so that to me, honestly, is more important than who scores the goals. And I know we can say, oh, this guy makes 11 million and this and this and that. Like lots of teams, Pittsburgh Penguins have won playoff series where Sidney Crosby didn't have a crazy offensive series. Now they've won playoff series where he had like dueling hat tricks with Alex Ovechkin and was an offensive star. I just think sometimes we overlook the fact that you need great team play by your guys that play the most minutes. And it's not always just about scoring goals. And so I think you want to see the Leafs, if you're in that organization, if you're a fan, you want to see those players dictate the terms. You want to see them be on it, not be sitting back waiting for something good to happen, but really asserting themselves. And it's not like Nikita Kucherov scoring every big goal for Tampa. Steven Stamkos scored a big goal in Game 4. He opened the scoring a minute in. That was his first goal in the series. And everyone, most people are probably looking at this like the Lightning have a great chance to win. And so you want to see a guy like John Tavares have a big moment, but he doesn't have to carry the team. Even Austin Matthews, I mean, he's already had a few big moments in the series, but it's not about him getting 3 points every game. I think it's about them making the Lightning uncomfortable. It's about forcing them into mistakes. It's about having good shift after good shift after good shift and maintaining a sense of belief in what you do. Because that didn't look like a team that had a lot of they didn't look like, I know they had a plan. They didn't look like they had a plan, right? They didn't execute a plan in the way they played in Game 4. And so that's why this Game 5 will be absolute must-watch TV if if you're at all interested in this story, either as a fan or someone who likes seeing chaos in Toronto or whatever your side you're taking. I just think that Game 5 will be fascinating social experiment to see what version of the Leafs show up.
Speaking of chaos, as we move from one series to another, the Carolina Hurricanes and the Boston Bruins, that series is all tied up at 2. But one back and forth that seems to be brewing is the brewing rivalry between Tony DeAngelo and Brad Marchand. Brad Marchand, by the way, going off in Game 4 when the team needs him the most. A 5-point game for Brad Marchand and a back and forth between him and TDA. Did you catch any of the reactions on Twitter before the Lightning game? Like, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, the perfection line's back, baby. The Bruins look pretty good. Pretty amazing, too, Julian. I would say that within 1 week, I've felt awful about my Bruins in 6th pick, and now I'm feeling pretty good about my Bruins in 6th pick, all within the span of a couple of days. That's the playoffs in a nutshell. Marchand doesn't surprise me. Like, we're talking about gamers. The Bruins are full of gamers. Those guys show up. They've had a lot of long playoff runs. They know what it takes at this time of year, and they needed to win that game, I think. There's obviously a chance to come back if they had gone down 3-1, but it's a totally different series now. I think there's questions about, the Hurricanes goaltending to a certain degree. I mean, Carolina didn't play poorly in Game 4, but, took some penalties that got them in trouble, and just, some of the details were a little bit off, but it wasn't like it wasn't a no-show game or anything like that. And so I think it's an interesting series. And again, momentum swinging all over the place there. And Carolina, they've won series, but this is a big test for them, especially with some of the question marks about their goaltending and who's going to play net. The best way to proceed with that, because Frederik Andersen carried the ball for them all season before getting injured late in the year.
That is true. I'll just add this though, and you don't have to get into it if you don't want to. Just the thing that just intrigued me the most is that one back and forth with D'Angelo Marchand, where a lot of people were trying to lip read with Brad Marchand. I can't confirm if Marchand in fact said TDA is racist. It's just that a lot of people latched onto that and made that into a big thing. Regardless of how you skew it, that is going to be a storyline that is going to continue for the rest of the series, how those two are going to go at it. Even near the end of the game, as Marchand is just, as the Bruins are icing the game, Tony DeAngelo chucking his stick to try to prevent Brad Marchand from scoring. Like those are things that are going to persist in a rivalry between two players. Those are things that stick out in a rivalry like that. That's something that obviously stood out to me in the last day.
And it's jet fuel for Marchand. Like, he loves this stuff. Sort of like Corey Perry in his prime, and Perry's still doing it. Look, he scored a goal in the Leafs series here. Scored 2, but scored 1 in game 4. But when those guys, when they're getting under the skin, when they're playing their best, they're producing offense. I mean, that's the dream scenario for the Bruins. Obviously, you don't want to see him go too far, but I mean, that's what Brad Marchand does. And he's, I've said it before, I think he's going to Hockey Hall of Fame, honestly, if you look at his career and where the numbers are trending towards. If he's just a fantastic player and world-class shift disturber too.
I see what you did there. Let's talk about Pittsburgh and the New York Rangers. I have to say, I wasn't sure the Pittsburgh Penguins were going to have a series lead like how they have on the New York Rangers, especially on the way that they've had it. We Tristan Jarry not being available to them as of this recording. Who knows how that injury front's going to look? Casey DeSmith out, Louis Domingue being put in, and Sidney Crosby all the while still having a great series for them. What do you think of the Penguins and the way they've been playing in this series against the Rangers so far?
Well, I think a lot of people slept on the Penguins a little bit.
Absolutely.
To me, they actually had a pretty good year. They're not sort of the team they were 5 years ago when they were, winning the Stanley Cups, but these guys know how to get the job done. And so I would not have probably predicted this. If you told me Louis Domingue was going to start multiple games in the series, I would have probably thought it was going the wrong way for Pittsburgh with respect to Louis Domingue, but sort of a journeyman who's not been delivered in these moments in the past, not really been given a chance to or earned the chance to. But full credit to Pittsburgh and they're scoring goals. And, I think that's the key because Shesterkin, I think we all thought was a potential sort of X factor, flip the series one way or the other. And Penguins are in a great spot now to finish this thing off. And so, I'm not surprised that they could win the series, but, you're right. Maybe the way they've won a couple of games, even when they've lost, that the one got away from them a little bit, but it's like turn back the clock here. We got the Capitals and the Penguins still at it. Ovechkin and Crosby still making noise in like year 17 or whatever we're at. And I think it's kind of cool that you contrast that with some of the younger players making their presence felt on the stage too.
Am I a hater for wanting the Rangers to win? Because as cool as a story of the Penguins coming back from their last dance tour, the Rangers also kind of represents like a new era, like newer teams kind of stepping up and considering themselves as contenders. Like, I get the Pittsburgh Penguins story is cool. I just want to see different teams just step up and win these rounds.
No, I don't think that makes you a hater. I can understand that. I mean, I don't have any strong feelings one way or the other, but we're talking about Boston, Pittsburgh, and Washington again. Like, these are 3 teams for the last 10 years or more have been making big playoff moments, right? And so, of course, that the flip side of that is there's a lot of teams who haven't been getting that chance. And so, whether it's Carolina or Toronto or the Rangers here, maybe you think this way about LA. They're bouncing back. That they were up and then they've been down. I think it's good for the league to have some degree of turnover and have success come back on you. But I mean, look, that series isn't done yet. I just don't know if the Rangers are quite ready is sort of my feeling about them. It's not that I think as an organization, they're on a great track, but Just feels like maybe this isn't quite yet their time, but let's wait and see. They still got to play the games, and Shesterkin is a great goaltender. Obviously, there's some difference makers on their side, Panarin and Zibanejad, and all that.
We all feel better with the confidence that comes from great grooming. Personal grooming is, well, personal. But whatever your personal style, waxing gives you an endless amount of choices so you can keep your skin looking smooth and healthy. European Wax Center are the experts in waxing for everyone. They help you feel like your best, inside and out. No matter what kind of wax you're looking for, their wax specialists will have you covered. Whether you want your back, shoulders, legs, nose, even your eyebrows, you can get groomed by the experts at European Wax Center. They offer personalized consultations, so you can find the wax that works for you. When you first start a waxing routine, it can actually be a little bit intimidating, but the more you go, the more comfortable it actually is. The pros at European Wax Center can help you start and stick to that routine. They are also committed to keeping you safe while they keep you smooth with enhanced hygiene measures for an added level of confidence and care. With so many convenient locations, your local European Wax Center is always easy to get to. The online booking system makes getting a reservation simple and straightforward. You can even use the EWC app to book your waxing service. European Wax Center. Well-groomed is wax-groomed. Ready to try it? European Wax Center is so confident you'll love your experience. Your very first wax is free. Book your free wax today at waxcenter.com. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp Online Therapy. Life can be really overwhelming, and a lot of people can be burnt out without even knowing. You start feeling lack of motivation. You feel helpless or trapped, detachment, fatigue. I know I felt stuff like that before. I know I do a lot of stuff and a lot of podcasts and a lot of different shows and a lot of work with the Athletic. And there are moments where I genuinely feel, burnt out and tapped out. And I try to take breaks when I can, and I try to do things to help myself feel better. But, these things happen. I'm human, just like you are watching this. We associate burnout with work, and it's actually not even the only cause. Any of our roles in life, whether you're dealing with your family or stressful relationship or anything with your friends, like it's something else that could also lead to that as well. And BetterHelp Online Therapy wants to remind you to prioritize yourself. Talking with someone can help you figure out what's causing stress in your life. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist. So you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can be matched with a therapist in under 48 hours. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. And Chris Johnston Show listeners, you get 10% off the first month of your time at BetterHelp if you go to betterhelp.com/Johnston. BetterHelp, BetterHelp.com/Johnston. People, it's Julian here with a message from Athletic Greens. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient and daily nutrition, especially heading into the flu and cold season. It's not a fun time. In just one scoop and a cup of water every day, that's it. That's literally it. That's amazing. No need for a million different other pills and supplements and all that extra stuff. Athletic Greens is it. To make it easy, Athletic Greens will give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your very first purchase. All you have to do, visit athleticgreens.com/Johnston. It's CJ's last name. How easy? It doesn't get any easier than that. athleticgreens.com/Johnston to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. That is true. I want to move on quickly to Colorado and Nashville. Looks as there's a very good possibility the Colorado Avalanche could handle their business, and the Predators won't be in the playoffs that long. But still a cool story seeing Connor Ingram getting to play. I just want to shout out my colleague Adam Vingan at The Athletic. Wrote a great story on Connor's parents. The story is called Predators Goalie Connor Ingram's Breakout Game as seen through his parents' eyes. And that references Ingram playing in game 2 of that series against the Avalanche here. I mean, fun to see Connor Ingram play, but what a dominant display by the Colorado Avalanche so far.
Yeah, the Avs are what we thought they were so far in the series. Offensively, they just feel inevitable. There was the one close game, the overtime game. But even that night, like Cale Makar had like 10 shots on net or something. Look, the bigger test for the Avalanche is still to come. I am willing to pronounce this one over. I think I predicted it to be a sweep. Doesn't mean it'll be a sweep,
too.
but like a lot of us looked at the series, and with UC Saros being out of the mix, it was just going to be hard to chart a path for Nashville to win. They've shown some fight, have the Predators, but I just think they're overmatched here by a superior opponent. And look, it wouldn't surprise me one bit to see the Colorado Avalanche in the Stanley Cup final this spring. So, they've got bigger goals, and the quicker they can get through the series with Nashville, likely the better. Just a little bit more rest, chance to heal the bodies. See where Darcy Kemper's at after taking that stick, in the area near his eye, and load up to be ready for the future rounds.
I believe we both considered not only the Colorado-Nashville series to go Colorado's way in a sweep, but correct me if I'm wrong, I think we thought Dallas and Calgary not only would go Calgary's way, but also as a sweep. At least I did.
I had Flames in 5, so I can't be right.
Okay, so gentlemen's sweep at the very least. So it's a surprise to both of us, I'm sure, that the Dallas Stars have a 2-1 series lead. And Johnny Gaudreau said this over the weekend. I think we were kind of underdogs all year. Nobody expected us to be where we're at right now. So just keep that same mindset like we've had all year, and I think we'll be fine. Fair or foul at Johnny Gaudreau saying that the Flames have been considered underdogs all year?
I think it's fair enough. I mean, I don't read too much into quotes sometimes in the playoffs, because I feel like what they are is it's a reflection of what the team's telling itself, right? And so if they feel that, maybe they were overlooked. I mean, not a lot of people are predicting they would have the kind of season they did. I think that's probably what he means. But at the same time, they're clearly not an underdog in this series. Maybe they are now because they're down 2-1 and having trouble scoring goals. And you're seeing sort of that Dallas Stars hockey that propelled them to a cup final in the bubble in August 2020, just how tight they can play. There's reason now to maybe have some more doubts about the Flames, but, they were a pretty prohibitive favorite in this series. I still think they should be. But huge game 4, clearly that they want to avoid going in that hole and need to find a way to stick with it and not get too discouraged and, let their star players do what they do. I mean, those guys scored a lot of goals this year. And they also did a good job all season of keeping it out of their net. And so I do think that it's been a pretty, maybe surprisingly or not, but vicious series, or like there's a lot of edge and animosity in the games, and it's tightly contested. And, we'll see if the Flames are underdogs or not in game 4.
Yeah, I'm just glad there's goals because after the first 2 games, there were 2 goals between both teams after 2 games. So thank God both teams decided to make their series a little bit more interesting.
And there were like 7 expected goals or something, which is remarkably low too. Like it's not just there weren't goals, there weren't a lot of chances. It wasn't just because the goaltenders were on some crazy bender. It was, there just wasn't a lot of offense being generated from spots where players are expected to score.
So we'll move on from that to the St. Louis, Minnesota series where Ville Husso's out. Jordan Binnington comes in. Jordan Binnington gets his first playoff win since the 2019 Cup run, and the Blues and the Wild are tied at 2. This is going 7. I said it would go 7. It's just been a seesaw battle between those two sides all series.
It has. And St. Louis is dealing with all kinds of injuries on the blue line. Like already having your depth tested this early in the playoffs is a difficult spot to be in. I'm with you. I feels like game 7 is going to be in Minnesota if it happens. I still like the Wild in the series, but St. Louis is pushed back pretty good. And so, maybe Jordan Binnington can channel some of those big cup vibes and harness what he did back then. But this one still got some time left to go, I would think. I don't see either team bending or folding. It's just going to be who can deliver the biggest moments here in these last 3 games.
I was wondering, transitioning over to the Kings-Oilers series. Game 4 was a golden opportunity for the Oilers to take that 3-1 series lead. And the Kings, another team in this postseason where maybe they're not necessarily ready for the bright light. Maybe they are in hindsight. Who knows? That series is also tied at 2.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Leafs. It's hard for me to separate the Oilers and the Leafs. Like, it feels like the same kind of dynamic. Like, just such a big moment for their group to go home for Game 5. Like, you want to remove doubt from that game if you're them. They've won some lopsided games and they're still down. They're still tied 2-2. Feels like they're down in a sense. I expected this to be tougher though. That was the one prediction I stuck with on this series. I didn't think the Kings were just going to go away easy, and the Oilers are going to have to earn this. But they're still also in a good spot with home ice advantage, with having some of the best players in the world on their side, and it's really about how they manage the pressure and the expectations and everything. I think that will determine, how this thing goes. But, Todd McClellan called a shot. He said, we're not just here for the experience or whatever at the start of the series. We're here to win it. And the Kings very much have a chance to do that.
Absolutely. And if it doesn't go their way for that core, which a lot of people are expecting the Kings to be better in the years to come, that's a series they can hold on to for experience and know that they did pretty well against a team that was expected to beat them. So we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. The last playoff series we have to get to, there's a potential for the upset of the playoffs here. The Washington Capitals knock off the Florida Panthers.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to an executive for another team yesterday whose team didn't make the playoffs, and he's like, you guys will all say would be this huge upset. And he's like, but both teams had 100 points. He's like, really, what's the difference? Did Florida win more games in a shootout or overtime? I actually didn't go look that up, but I guess the point he was making is that the East is so close that no one should be surprised if anyone beats anyone. That being said, I believe I took Florida in 5. So again, another prediction gone wrong for the Siege. And I think the most concerning thing for me about the Panthers isn't just they're down 2-1. They've been outplayed, more often than they've outplayed the opponents. They've not played their best, and so that's a tough spot for an organization. Again, they haven't gotten over the hump. That those guys haven't won playoff series. It's such an amazing season, but they're in real upset territory now, and I think the Capitals smell blood. So, it's why you watch the playoff games, because you got to throw out the regular season records to a certain degree once we get to this time of the year. And the truth of the matter is, Florida's not played its best game. We've seen their offense kind of go a little bit dry, and they're not controlling the puck enough. And so now they put themselves in a position where the Capitals, who wanted no part of this series initially, I think they wanted to try to climb up and not be in the wild card position. They've already played both goalies in their series due to performance reasons, and yet they have a 2-1 lead. I mean, that's a pretty good set of circumstances for Peter Laviolette's team.
Even though there is the point made about the fact that both teams are 100-point teams. You mentioned the offense for Florida drying up in this series, but it was as good as it was in the regular season for a reason. They were a dominant force in the regular season, and it would be a huge upset to see them go down against a good Washington Capitals team, but a team that should still be on the other side of that kind of cup contender status where they're on the way out. It would be a massive failure again for another President's Trophy winning team, where it seems as if there could be like a curse with that. If you win it, it's obviously it's not a guarantee you win the cup, but feels like a bit of a burden at this point.
Well, do you know what's very much in play here? You could have the 4 teams that started their series on the road in the East win.
Man,
Boston is in position to do that against Carolina. Again, no guarantee, but it's certainly possible. We could see Toronto losing the series to Tampa. We could see Pitt, had to play the first 2 games at MSG, winning that series, and you could see Washington that went on the road to Florida. I mean, that the 4 lower seeds, it's still in play that they could all win. Just that to me does underline how close the conference is. That point totals aside, I don't think there's a whole lot to choose between the teams in this conference.
Boston, Tampa Bay, Washington, Pittsburgh. We're not just talking about teams who started their series on the road. We're talking about some of the better franchises over the last decade in the National Hockey League, and all those teams have won Stanley Cups. So maybe some people might not be nearly as surprised.
Right, and played for Stanley Cups and always are there. Played in the conference final a whole whack of times. Yeah, so maybe we're going to get – you're cheering for the new guys to break through, and it might just be the old standbys that pull it off.
That's what I'm saying. Anyway, we had to run through all those series. Now it's time for us to get through a quick Ask CJ. Shout out to everyone who sends in their questions on Twitter and on Discord as well. One thing we'll do too, I'll mention this as well. I know some of the award nominations are starting to come out for some of the major awards. We'll start to kind of mention them a little bit like later on, like maybe on the Thursday episode or a little later on down the road, but we know that is to come. I'll bring up this question first from Samuel Fleming on Twitter. So what are your thoughts about the American Stanley Cup TV broadcasts?
I've got a chance to watch a little bit because I was in Tampa here the last few days. I have to say, I really like what TNT's doing. I like the broadcast. I would say that Wayne Gretzky the fact he's willing to say stuff is interesting. You know, you got one of the goats of the sport who's on there and like calling it like it is. You know, I think Biz Nasty's pretty entertaining on there. Rick Tocchet is an underrated part of their broadcast. And so I've actually quite enjoyed getting a chance to watch some of the TNT because, you know, during the regular season, the truth was I just didn't see a whole lot. It's not as available up in Canada. And so, you know, I'm not as familiar with, I know a lot of these people, I guess, personally, but I haven't been familiar with what the two networks have done. I've actually just by chance seen less of the ESPN coverage, not because I've been avoiding it, but I always like seeing my friend Emily Kaplan on there. And you know, so I'll give some thoughts on ESPN when I watch, but it just seems for whatever reason, the nights I've been off and watching games, they've been the ones that have been on TNT or TBS down here. And really, honestly, they have fun. I think that anything that showcases a sport as fun is a positive. And I think that's what that broadcast in general does a good job of.
Well, shout out Anson Carter too on that TNT panel. He's also doing a good job. But also just from what I've seen off the ESPN broadcast, I've really enjoyed them too. The intermission panels with Steve Levy and Mark Messier and Chris Chelios. They've done a pretty good job as well. John Butchergrass on his calls, he's been great too. And Sean McDonough, I mean, gotta shout out the Syracuse alum here, also doing a good job. Have to do that. So ESPN, I think they've been doing all right.
Did you see Wayne Gretzky had a World Series ring from the Atlanta Braves?
No, I did not know that.
Yeah, he was wearing it on the set. He didn't tell the whole story, but the Atlanta Braves gave him a World Series ring, and they joked like you went to one game and you got a World Series ring. But anyway, it was still kind of cool. But I don't know the backstory. We're gonna have to do some digging there. That and Jeff Carter's middle name. We'll get there.
You tease. From Jade Braderi 0825. Are you a breast or thigh man? Chicken, of course. Be careful about how you answer this one.
I like a chicken breast.
Yeah, me too. Big chicken breast. Just want to make that clear for everyone listening. From Mike Lang 6613 on Discord. When you go for runs at home, CJ, do you use the same route every time or do you try and switch it up?
I like to use more or less the same one every time. I know that makes me a weirdo, but I like to think the less thinking, the better. So if I just have a route, for me, it's just an out and back. So if I want to go a little farther, I just run farther before I turn back and go back the same way. But generally, I like the same route because I kind of shut my brain off and just do it. It's almost feels automatic. Although it's funny, I did 3 runs in Tampa this week, and I did 3 completely different routes each time. You know, I've been down here enough. I know different ways to go in different places, but I mixed and matched well in Tampa. So I don't really know why that was. It wasn't like a deep thought thing, but got here and just wanted to see different parts of the city.
Last one for you from NL Domar. This guy's actually from the Netherlands, and he actually put together like an interesting Excel spreadsheet, but I'm not going to go through all the details of it. But his general question is, do you think a different point system would ever be implemented in the NHL? I think
there's a chance we'll see it. I mean, look, the league discussed it way back in 2004-05. They made a whole bunch of changes that year that they had the year-long lockout, and that was one of the changes that was on the table. They ultimately didn't take the plunge. But the fact it's been discussed at a level where it was in consideration I see no reason why you might not see it again. It's pretty clear that Gary Bettman likes this system. He likes his playoff format, which we've talked about. He likes the point system. So I think as long as the current leadership of the league is unchanged, you won't see that sort of change. But, fresh ideas, new blood will come in at some point. I don't think it's a hot take to say that a commissioner that's been on the job 25, 30 years, he's not going to do it forever. And so there will be some turnover there. And so I do think at some point in the future, some version of the 3-2-1 will at least be examined again. Because, I think that there's a case to be made for it. But the league likes things to be tight. Oddly enough, this year wasn't that tight. Islanders missed the playoffs by like 20 points. They were the next lowest team after those 8 in the East. So, over time, I do think you'll see changes. I mean, look, the league's changed. The point system's changed multiple times in my lifetime, right? There used to be ties when I was a kid. Then they went to points for a loss, and then they were an overtime loss, and they added the shootout, and now a shootout loss. So I think it'll be changed again.
So we're doing this recording after we recorded today's CJ show. Barry Trotz has been let go as head coach of the New York Islanders. Stunning development around the hockey world. Siege, what's your reaction to this?
Well, this is a first, an add-on to our episode, and I'm doing it from the airport. So that shows how big the news is. And,
yes.
It's funny. I got a couple texts right when this went down. Like, people who work for other teams are just shocked by it. Apparently already within, the first, it's within an hour of this news being announced, there's already been teams that have reached out to inquire about Barry Trotz, to his agent. I think a lot of people are still trying to get their minds around what went on here. I mean, we're talking about a guy in 3 seasons with the Islanders, twice went to the conference final and lost to the team that won the Stanley Cup. Guy won a Jack Adams trophy a couple years ago. Even this year, obviously the Islanders missed the playoffs, but, they started with a long road trip while they were waiting for Barclays to get opened up. I think they played 50 games in their last 99 days of the season just because of COVID shutdowns and everything. So, pretty difficult circumstances for him. And so I think that this is even among this year where we've seen so many coaches lose their jobs and have uncertain futures. This is a surprise even in that environment. I don't think very many people thought that Barry Trotz would become available.
Like, one, why are they doing this now? Well, there was an opportunity maybe to do it as soon as the season was over. Why do it now? 2, you mentioned it. That road trip at the beginning of the year kind of hurt them, and they still tried to be competitive near the end of the year. They were just too many points away from the threshold to make the playoffs. Why should this all, I know you can't answer it, but why should this fall on Barry Trotz?
Well, 2 things stand out in my mind. Lou Lamoriello told reporters that he felt this group needed a fresh voice. I mean, it's not unusual. Unfortunately, coaches are hired to be fired. It's a cliche, but it's true. If you look around at the way things go, I mean, John Cooper's the unusual one in that he's been, over 10 years with one team. I mean, shelf life of a coach is limited. I think the second thing that will become maybe a bit more apparent is there's an associate coach with the Islanders, Lane Lambert, whose name has been kicked around for other jobs. I believe there's lots of chatter out there that he's someone Detroit might be interested in at least having a discussion with about their head coach opening. And so it's possible it's a combination of those factors. But there's even been some talk too, though, that Barry Trotz is interested perhaps in a management type of a role versus a coaching role moving forward. And so, I don't want to say too much because I really don't have the one answer. I don't know the exact story here, but, I wonder maybe if Lou Lamoriello had some concern that, maybe Barry Trotz just didn't have the juice for it anymore. It's hard to say. One thing we know with Lou Lamoriello is we're never going to know. He's never going to be too expansive about what went on here. He said he'd rather not get into the reasons for it. So we're left to speculate a bit, left to guess a little bit. But even with all these things said, this is a surprising development, Julian.
And on that, with Barry Trotz and him being available, it wouldn't surprise me if every single team with a coaching vacancy, even teams who were thinking about letting some of their guys go, would be reaching out to Barry Trotz saying, hey, do you want to coach our team? This dude should be nabbed up by any team that could make him their head coach.
Do you think someone in the playoffs would consider a mid-series coaching change?
That would be one of the wildest things ever. I don't ever see that happening, but that would be one of those wildest things you could imagine. But also Barry Trotz I mean, it probably would mess up the feng shui a little bit. But again, Barry Trotz, who has a winning pedigree, has had the staying power. I'm sure he has the respect of a lot of players in the NHL. Like, I don't know if he's the guy you would consider doing that for, but like definitely teams who have coaches right now wouldn't surprise me if they at least questioned it. Maybe not mid-season, but maybe after this year, if the year doesn't go the way they want it to go.
He'd be a clear upgrade on multiple coaches still coaching games right now. And, I don't mean in this circumstance. I mean, I think it'd be awfully difficult to enter with a team you don't know and expect to have any success. But, this does alter some decision-making. You look at the Winnipeg Jets have a coaching opening. Barry's from Manitoba. You wonder about the Vegas Golden Knights, where it's not yet clear if Pete DeBoer will be back. Would Kelly McCrimmon be interested in him? Vancouver makes some sense. A team like Florida even. I know Andrew Brunette had such a great year stepping in for Joel Quenneville, but, he's still an interim coach. And look, someone's going to lose a playoff series in these next few days, and maybe they're going to be looking at a coaching change and see, someone who's had the success of Barry Trotz. I mean, he won a Stanley Cup in 2018 and has been to 2 conference finals since then. I mean, this guy's had all kinds of success. Obviously coached in Nashville forever before that. And so he's been in the league a long time. It's clear he's got the right mix of systems understanding, the way he treats players and people on the team. I just think he's the total package. He's a rock star as far as coaching goes. And so, now it's up to someone to convince him to stay. He's also got one more year on his deal. He's getting paid $4 million next year. So, if he wants to take some time, he can take it. But my guess is we're going to know pretty quickly, what his next move is, because this man's got options.
And dude is going to secure the bag, because $4 million. I mean, I think we do all right with $4 million, but some team is going to have to give him more than $4 million to make him kind of sway away from that.
Right. Well, I mean, $4 million is his floor now. He's not making any less than that next year, and there's a chance he makes more depending on who's coming in to hire him. You wonder who would be going in Long Island. If it's not Lane Lambert just getting promoted, I mean, is this a shock the system kind of hiring, or are they looking at a John Tortorella, a Mike Babcock? I mean, it was already a strange kind of wild coaching market. This just adds another element, because not only now does Barry Trotz potentially slide into another job, that could mean someone that we wouldn't have thought was going to loses their job for them to hire Barry Trotz. And so the wheel is spinning pretty viciously at this point. There was a number of coaches that were in lame duck seasons this year. And so stay tuned on the coaching market.
Oh, absolutely. We on the CJ Show are going to be all over that when it comes time. This is wild. The fact we were able to add on to this podcast episode.
Cheers, buddy.
Cheers, buddy. Let me get my water bottle over to you.
I got to get home to my good coffee. I'm just slumming it with a Starbucks out here at Tampa International.
Oh, also while you're here, you're wearing the Bear hat. Can you tell everyone where the Bear hat is from?
North Standard, my people.
Yes, we have to shout them out because people ask about the hat all the time. Siege, thank you for this add-on.
All right, flying home now, so no more news today, please.
Okay, no more news today. Okay, let's do it for real. For CJ, I'm Julian. For real now, we're saying so long and peace.
The Chris Johnston Show.
Powered by Sports Interaction, Canada's sportsbook.
Inside the game, twice a week. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris. And follow Julian McKenzie @JK McKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.